right, so get ready because we've got some really fascinating writings about India, its relationship with the West.
Ooh.
And we're talking about like some big ideas here, nationhood culture, the whole shebang.
Yeah.
And really at the heart of it all, this idea of a third way,
Right.
a path that's distinct from both traditional Indian frameworks
Yeah.
and European models.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a fascinating concept,
Isn't it?
especially when you think about how much of the world has really been shaped by those two dominant forces.
Exactly. And, our guide through all of this is going to be Nirmal Verma,
Okay.
a brilliant Indian author. And even though his essay, India in Europe, was written back in 1986,
Right.
it hits on themes that are so relevant for today.
I agree.
Really digs into how India, with its, millennia-old civilization,
Yeah.
grapples with European ideas, especially after colonialism.
You know what struck me is how Verma highlights that tension
Yeah.
between the European concept of a nation state, built around the individual,
Right.
and India's more holistic view.
Okay, yeah, so unpack that a bit. What does he mean by holistic?
Sure.
Because I think that's where a lot of my own assumptions start to fall apart.
Well, think of it this way.
Okay.
Verma argues that in the European model, the state is essentially a reflection of individual ego.
Okay.
It's about individual rights, ambition,
Gotcha.
and ultimately individual nations competing on the world stage.
Mm-hmm.
And, he points to the world wars as like a stark example of where that can lead.
Big egos, big conflicts.
Exactly.
Okay, so how is India different?
Well, Verma paints this picture of India as a civilization woven together by this shared web of beliefs and practices and philosophies.
Okay.
It's not about like one dominant power or religion,
Right.
but like a tapestry of diverse communities that are unified by something deeper.
He even talks about the Indian landscape itself
Yes.
as being steeped in myth and symbolism and compares it to how Dante saw medieval Europe,
Yes.
which really emphasizes this idea that for Indians, culture is intertwined with the very land they inhabit.
It's like the difference between, defining yourself by your nationality versus by your entire family history, your cultural heritage,
Well,
all of those stories that have been passed down through generations.
So we have this ancient interconnected civilization encountering European colonialism,
Right.
which wasn't exactly known for sensitivity to other cultures.
And that's where things get messy.
Yeah.
Verma is very critical of British colonialism,
Sorry.
arguing that it forced a kind of pseudo-consciousness upon Indians.
Pseudo-consciousness? What is that?
Yeah, basically he's saying that colonialism caused a lot of Indians to doubt their own traditions, their own ways of knowing,
Yeah.
while also being unable to fully embrace European beliefs.
Right.
It's like being caught between two worlds,
Yeah.
not belonging to either. And honestly, doesn't that resonate even today?
Totally.
You think about how many of us struggle with identity in our globalized world,
Right.
trying to reconcile our heritage with all these modern influences.
It's like that pressure to conform while also feeling like you're losing a part of yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
So how did this play out specifically in India?
Well, this internal fragmentation, this feeling of being caught between worlds, really had a huge impact on the Indian independence movement.
Okay.
Verma identifies two main camps. You had the Western-educated elite, who were pushing for a secular European-style nation-state.
Basically trying to beat the West at its own game.
Exactly. And then you had these communal groups that were focused on reviving an idealized, religiously defined past.
Right.
But here's the thing. Verma argues that both sides were ultimately products of the same Western-influenced mindset.
So even as they were fighting for independence, they were still trapped within the very frameworks imposed by colonialism.
Precisely. They'd absorbed that European notion of what a nation should be.
Wow.
Even while rejecting British rule.
That's a catch-22.
Right.
So where does Gandhi fit into all of this? Because he's the one who ultimately led India to independence.
Right, and Verma sees Gandhi as this key figure who offered a different path.
Okay.
A way to bridge these seemingly irreconcilable divides.
All right, so tell me more about that.
He understood that real independence wasn't just about kicking out the British. It was about reclaiming India's own unique civilizational consciousness, like weaving together those fragmented threads into something new, something authentically Indian.
I'm sensing a but coming here, though, because clearly that vision didn't fully materialize.
Right.
India today is still dealing with many of the tensions that Verma was talking about.
Right, and Verma doesn't shy away from that.
Okay.
He acknowledges that, there were complexities and tensions and divisions within India long before the British showed up.
So it's not like a simple good versus evil or us versus them kind of narrative.
Exactly.
It's about recognizing the nuances,
the
internal struggles within a culture that get amplified.
Yeah.
When you have these encounters with outside forces.
Exactly. And that's what makes his analysis so valuable. He's pushing us to move beyond those simplistic binaries and grapple with the real challenges of forging a path forward.
So let's talk about that path forward.
Okay.
What did this third way, this alternative to both European and traditional Indian models, what did that actually look like in Verma's mind?
Well, it's not about creating some rigid blueprint or ideology.
Okay.
It's more about a shift in perspective. A way of approaching the challenges of modernity from a place of rootedness in India's civilizational values.
Okay. I get the theory, but I need something concrete. Like, give me an example.
Sure. Think about Gandhi's concept of Swaraj.
Okay.
It's often translated as self-rule. But it goes much deeper than just political independence.
All right. Break it down for me.
Okay. So Swaraj is about self-governance at all levels.
Okay.
Individual, community, and national. It's about recognizing our interconnectedness, our responsibility to each other and to the larger web of life.
So it's not just about who's in charge, but how decisions are made.
Exactly.
How power is distributed, even how we live our daily lives.
Yeah, it's about finding that balance between individual freedom and collective responsibility, between material progress and spiritual well-being, something that, by the way, modern Western societies are still struggling with.
Oh, totally. We've mastered the individual freedom and material progress part. But the whole collective good and spiritual well-being, not so much.
And that's why Verma's ideas are so relevant today. He's challenging us to reconsider what we value, what constitutes a good life, a good society.
So it's not about romanticizing the past or rejecting progress.
No.
It's about learning from the past. Recognizing that development doesn't have to mean erasing your identity. It's about being rooted and open to the world.
Absolutely. And it's about recognizing that India's experience offers valuable insights for the rest of the world.
Because we all grapple with globalization, rapid technological advancement, and, frankly, a crisis of meaning in many ways.
It's like India's story becomes this microcosm of the larger human story. This struggle to balance the old and the new, the local and the global, the material and the spiritual.
Exactly.
But there's another piece to this puzzle that I think we need to address, and that's language.
Ah, yes. Language plays a pivotal role in Verma's analysis.
Okay, good.
He argues that the very words we use to understand these concepts, like nation, culture, civilization, are themselves shaped by European thought.
So even when we're trying to articulate something outside of that European framework, we're still trapped by the limitations of our language.
Precisely. It's like trying to describe a new color. Using only the words for colors we already know.
And that's where things get really interesting. Because if we really want to grasp India's unique perspective, we need to go beyond just the words themselves.
And dive into the deeper meanings embedded within Indian languages and thought systems.
Absolutely.
So we need to learn a whole new way of seeing, a whole new way of thinking.
It's about expanding our mental frameworks, stretching our imaginations to grasp these concepts that might initially seem foreign or even contradictory.
Okay.
Think of it like trying to understand a complex piece of music.
All right.
You can't just hear the individual notes. You have to listen for the melodies, the harmonies, the underlying structure.
Okay, that's a helpful analogy, but how do we even begin to do that? Where do we go from here?
Well, it's a journey of discovery, a lifelong process, really.
Okay.
It's about immersing ourselves in different cultures, languages, and ways of seeing the world.
Mm-hmm.
And it begins with something as simple as recognizing the limitations of our own language, our own ingrained assumptions.
So it's less about finding definitive answers
Right.
and more about asking the right questions.
Exactly. And it's a journey that requires humility, curiosity, and a willingness to challenge our own preconceived notions.
Mm-hmm.
It's about recognizing that truth and wisdom can come from unexpected sources.
It sounds like a daunting task.
It can be.
But also incredibly exciting.
It is, and it's a journey that's worth taking.
Good
Because
deal.
in the process of understanding others, we also come to understand ourselves more deeply.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
Verma's critique of European influence, his celebration of India's unique civilizational identity, and this idea of a third way.
Right.
But as always, there's so much more to explore. Before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a thought to ponder. So Verma believed that India, with this unique blend of tradition and modernity, could offer a third way, a path forward that goes beyond the limits of Western and purely traditional models. Do you think that's still possible in today's world, and what might that look like?
That's the big question, right? And honestly, I don't think there's a simple answer, but I think Verma gives us a good framework for even thinking about it. He reminds us that progress doesn't have to mean blindly following that Western model. You know, it's about being more selective and discerning, finding ways to integrate the best of modernity with the wisdom and values that have sustained India for centuries. Okay. It's like, you wouldn't just throw out your grandmother's recipe book just because you got a fancy new kitchen gadget. Right. The old ways still hold wisdom. Yeah. Sometimes they even work better.
I love that analogy. So it's not about rejecting progress.
No.
But about being mindful of what we choose to adopt and how we adapt it to our own unique context.
Exactly. And that requires a deep understanding of both our traditions and the forces that are shaping the modern world. It's about critical thinking, having the courage to question those assumptions.
Yeah.
And ultimately making conscious choices about what kind of future we want to create.
So if we follow Verma's line of thinking, could we see India offering a different model of development?
It's possible.
One that prioritizes things like sustainability, social harmony, spiritual well-being, alongside economic growth. I mean, that sounds pretty appealing.
It does.
In a world that feels obsessed with just more.
It's a vision that's gaining some traction globally, as people become disillusioned with the systems that we have now, the inequality, the environmental damage.
Right.
There's a sense that something has to change.
So it's not just about India finding its own path.
Right.
It's potentially about India showing the rest of us a new way forward.
Yeah.
A way to be both modern and rooted, global, and true to ourselves.
I think that's the power of Verma's message. He's reminding us that India's story isn't just this isolated narrative.
Yeah.
It's a global story, a story that has the potential to inspire us to reimagine what's possible, to create a world that's more just sustainable and ultimately more human.
I think we need to let that sink in for a moment. That's a really powerful message to end on. So we started this deep dive exploring India's unique journey in the modern world through the lens of Nirmal Verma's essay. Now, hopefully this has given you some new ideas and questions to ponder.
Remember, this is just the beginning of your exploration. If you're intrigued by these ideas, there's a whole world of Indian thought and literature waiting to be discovered.
And we've included some resources in the show notes, but the real journey starts when you dive in yourself. So go explore, ask questions, and most importantly, stay curious.